The FIA World Rally Championship is one of motorsport's toughest tests of man and machine. In 1996, 9 rounds spanning 5 continents would decide the 2 titles, the Drivers' and Manufacturers' Championships, and those 9 rallies were very different in character. The International Swedish Rally provided a snowy start to the year. The unique Safari Rally in Kenya, the longest and toughest test of all. The newest event in the World Championship, the Rally Indonesia. The heat and dust of Greece in summer, the Acropolis Rally. South America played host to the Rally Argentina, home of the tango. For many, the home of rallying came next, Finland and the Thousand Lakes Rally. Then the longest journey of the year for the Rally Australia. Europe provided the setting for the final 2 events of the year, Italy's San Remo Rally, and finally the Rally Catalunya in northern Spain.
Just stop. Yes, spot on.
That was the scene in November 1995 when Colin McRae won his home event, the RAC Rally in the United Kingdom, to become the first British driver ever to become World Rally Champion. For 1996, McRae led the challenge for the Subaru team, running with number 1 on his car. Subaru became double world champions in 1995, winning the manufacturer's title as well, and were strong favourites to repeat those victories. McRae, the youngest ever world champion, is nothing if not spectacular. A string of accidents have punctuated his progression to the top. Joining the young Scotsman at Subaru was Sweden's Kenneth Eriksson. He'd taken 2 victories the previous year driving for Mitsubishi, together with a prestigious Asia-Pacific title. The third Impreza would be driven in 1996 by Piero Liatti from Italy. Even though it would be his first full season at the top level, he'd won the European Championship, so was no stranger to victory. The strongest challenge to Subaru was expected to come from the Mitsubishi team. Their Lancer Evolution 3 was something of an unknown quantity, but their will to win was enormous. Tommi Mäkinen from Finland was their number 1 driver, although with only 1 previous victory in the World Championship, some predicted he'd be no match for the likes of McRae and Eriksson. Although Mitsubishi would use a variety of drivers during the year, the lion's share of Mäkinen's support would come from the young Englishman Richard Burns, a former British champion. The third team to contest both World Championships was one of the cornerstones of rallying, Ford. They've only actually won the title once, but the team has contested the series for almost as long as anyone can remember. In 1996, their team leader would be Carlos Sainz. The twice world champion is one of Spain's national sporting heroes, with 17 victories from 73 events. Their second car would be in the hands of several drivers during the year, with Belgium's Bruno Thierry and Francois Delacour from France both featuring in the lineup. The snow and ice of Scandinavia in midwinter formed the backdrop to round 1 of the series, the International Swedish Rally. Bitterly cold it may have been, but the spectators were out in their thousands. Held in the very north of Europe, the rally was based in the city of Karlstad. Leg 1 consisted of 9 stages which took the cars northeastwards to their first overnight halt in Falun, led away by last year's winner Kenneth Eriksson. Despite his confidence, this was only his first rally for his new team, and the Subaru was taking a little getting used to.
Till H0 vänster.
The privately entered Toyota team was led by 4-times world champion Juha Kankkunen. Kankkunen began well. He was equal fastest on the first stage. His Toyota shared the lead with the Mitsubishi of a confident Tommi Mäkinen.
We have done very good work with the car, and it seems that it's been improved again.
Soon Mäkinen was out on his own, although not all the drivers were sharing his luck. Teammate Kenneth Bäcklund was one of them. Colin McRae began well, although he was only too aware that the rally's never been won by a non-Scandinavian.
Minus opens into 4 right minus over crest. Into 3 left plus over crest. Tightens maybe line 50. 6 left.
Carlos Sainz was competing on his first rally in a Ford since 1988, although he was on the pace right from the start. Unlike his teammate Francois Delacour, who seemed to struggle from problem to problem. After power steering failure, a broken turbo on stage 4 dropped Delacour out of the top 10. While most of the Europeans were having a relatively problem-free first day, the conditions were causing one or two drivers to hold their breath. Even Toyota's Thomas Rodstrom on his home event was caught out. While Ari Vatanen and co-driver Fabrizia Pons shivered their way through the day with a broken heater in their Ford Escort, McRae was having more serious difficulties. He and Derek Ringer sliding around with some kind of traction problem.
6 crest, 13.
At the end of the first leg, it was Mäkinen's Mitsubishi which led, although there was still an awfully long way to go. The second leg of 13 stages took the crews from Falun back to Karlstad in conditions which would make most people stay at home. The Scandinavians are a hardy bunch though, and the Finns in particular, who are beginning to sense victory. Mäkinen's Mitsubishi led the cars away from Falun, although the Toyota Celica of Kankkunen was only 6 seconds behind.
Really long K left. Tightens.
Then came the surprise of the rally, Carlos Sainz, who was third in a Ford Escort. Sweden is unique in many ways, not least of which is this stage at Torsby, which for 9 months of the year is a lake. Back in the forests once again, Colin McRae was finding day 2 a lot more to his liking. By the end of the day, McRae was just 40 seconds behind Juha Kankkunen, who'd slipped to 3rd place. That meant Sainz was second, a terrific performance from a driver supposedly still getting used to his new car. But the rally leader was still Tommi Mäkinen, who was more relieved than most to have reached the overnight halt. The third and final day saw a loop of 5 stages, which would bring the cars back to Karlstad for an afternoon finish. The day would hold mixed fortunes for the Scandinavians, with Thomas Rodstrom destined to finish in 6th place in his Toyota Celica. Ari Vatanen, though, saw his rally end prematurely when he rolled his Ford Escort.
Höger 2+.
Kenneth Eriksson brought his Subaru home in 5th place, a slightly disappointing result for the driver who'd won here 12 months previously. Kankkunen began the day badly.
Just, they were plowed on the top of the ditch and just went a bit wide and got stuck for, not for a long time, but after, the air filter was full of snow plus the windscreen inside, so I couldn't see anything in 10Ks and lost about half a minute there.
That allowed McRae to move within striking distance of 3rd place, a position he was to capture with a string of fastest stage times. The battle for the lead was far from over, though. Carlos Sainz began the day just 15 seconds behind Mäkinen and set off to catch the Finn. A transmission problem cost vital seconds, however, and Sainz had to settle for 2nd place. Sainz's last-minute dramas handed the rally to Tommi Mäkinen, only his 2nd win on a World Championship event. The Finn had driven superbly. He and co-driver Seppo Harjana hadn't put a wheel wrong and took a well-deserved victory. Performing the now traditional donut on ice is a tricky business, yet Tommy made even that look easy. The Swedish rally had kept its Scandinavians' only reputation intact, but only just. Mäkinen's winning margin was just 23 seconds from Sainz, with McRae, Kankkunen and Eriksson making up the rest of the top 5 places. In fact, out of the entire top 10, only 3 were non-Scandinavians. Mäkinen then took an early lead in the Drivers' World Championship with a 5-point advantage over Sainz. The surprise, though, was in the manufacturers' table. Mäkinen's victory, together with Bäcklund winning Group N, gave Mitsubishi a 4-point lead from Subaru. And so to round 2. From the frozen north of Europe, the series moved to Africa in April, so the contrast couldn't have been more pronounced. This is the Safari Rally, held over the Easter weekend in Kenya on Africa's east coast and based in the capital city, Nairobi. The first leg of the rally would consist of 5 competitive sections, covering around 500 kilometres. And first away, the reigning world champion Colin McRae in the first of the Subaru Imprezas. Despite only having contested the Safari once before, McRae was the early leader. There were, though, some drivers who'd never competed in Kenya before. One of those was Tommy Mäkinen. After the first section, Mäkinen would be in third place, less than a minute behind McRae. The Ford team had the most experience. Although the car was new to the event, Sainz knew all about the Safari.
I think it's special for everybody because it's completely different than the rest. The approach, the type of car, the preparation, everything.
Sainz was joined by Stig Blomqvist, who was competing on his 25th Safari. When McRae, the early leader, was slowed by a broken drive shaft, Kenneth Eriksson inherited the lead.
300.
It wasn't all good news for Subaru, though. Piero Liatti was forced to drive for most of one section with this puncture, which was changed at the next service halt. The Toyota team was represented on the Safari by Ian Duncan, who won the rally 2 years ago. In the absence of Juha Kankkunen, the team would count on the experience of the local driver.
Easy up to rough.
The Safari is the only endurance event in the World Championship, with helicopters allowed to land and offer assistance to the cars. Despite all the technical backup, the Ford team was quickly in trouble. The darkening skies told their own story. Heavy rain caused havoc on this year's rally, with the drivers facing conditions which resembled the RAC rally rather than the normally dry and dusty Safari. Some sections even had to be cancelled. This, believe it or not, is a stage, although it looks more like a river. At the end of the first day, McRae was in third place. Second was held by Tommy Mäkinen, whose co-driver Seppo Harjanne obviously wasn't impressed by the conditions. The overnight leader was Kenneth Eriksson, and the misted-up windscreen seemed to be his only headache. He was well pleased with his performance. Day 2, the longest day, began at 5 in the morning, and the cars would cover over 700 kilometres northwest of Nairobi, around Nakuru and Eldoret, before briefly visiting the Great Rift Valley on their way back to the capital. Day 2 began badly for Eriksson. All his good luck on day 1 deserted him early in the morning. Mäkinen now led the Safari rally, no mean feat at the first attempt. Ian Duncan in the Toyota was playing something of a waiting game. He was well used to the rally and suspected that the pace of the leading drivers was too fast. Something was bound to break. Softly, softly was the way he was planning things. Sure enough, Colin McRae discovered that speed isn't everything. He had a disastrous start to the second day. A faulty intercom meant that he missed a caution from his navigator Derek Ringer and had to call on the Subaru helicopter. By the time the cars reached the next service area, McRae was philosophical about his problems. The end of the second leg saw the first major retirement among the championship contenders. Suspension failure on Carlos Sainz's Ford Escort had meant that he'd had to drive slowly through the afternoon sections. That had led to the engine overheating, and a dejected Sainz knew that his Safari rally was over. In all, the rally lead had changed 3 times during the day. As the cars headed back to Nairobi, Kenneth Eriksson's Subaru was second. That meant that the Mitsubishi Lancer of Tommy Mäkinen led the Safari. For the second time in as many rallies, there'd be a two-way fight on the third and final day. Again, though, heavy overnight rain had forced the cancellation of the first 2 of the day's sections, so it was left to the final 3 to decide the rally. Tommy Mäkinen knew that the winner's trophy was almost his. The Subaru of Eriksson wasn't far behind, but luck was definitely not on his side. A puncture on the first section cost over 11 minutes, and Kenneth was left hoping that the Mitsubishi would have similar problems. Ford's championship hopes were now resting on the veteran Stig Blomqvist, who'd finish in 7th place. Kenjiro Shinazuka in the second of the Mitsubishis finished 6th, a good, safe performance. Another steady run resulted in Piero Liatti bringing his Subaru home in 5th place. 4th was McRae, sliding around in the African mud, instead of the dry, dusty conditions all the teams had been expecting. Ian Duncan's softly approach hadn't paid off, although a relatively trouble-free run had ended with third place. Suspension problems on day 2, the only hiccup.
Medium right opens. It's an easy one.
Kenneth Eriksson must have been wondering where all his good luck had gone. A series of punctures and broken drive shafts had finally cost him the chance of victory on the Safari Rally. He'd driven superbly throughout, but victory wasn't to be his. That didn't stop him trying, though. Just look at the state his brakes are in at the very last service halt. That left the Mitsubishi Lancer of Tommi Mäkinen to take a deserved victory, his second in as many rallies. Mitsubishi naturally were delighted. When one victory comes on snow and the other is won on a mixture of dust, rocks and deep mud, that's the mark of a world champion in the making. Tommy's winning margin was over 14 minutes, with Eriksson, Duncan, McRae and Liati making up the rest of the top 5. Amazingly, the top 10 was separated by nearly 4.5 hours. In the 2 championship tables, Mäkinen had extended his lead to 17 points from Eriksson, while 2 wins from 2 events ensured maximum points. In the Manufacturers' Championship, Mitsubishi still led. 1996 saw the first visit of the World Rally Championship to Asia, with round 3, the Rally Indonesia, providing a colourful and noisy introduction for the championship regulars. With nearly 200 million inhabitants, Indonesia is the 4th most populated country in the world. 9 special stages made up leg 1 of the rally, which took the cars from the start in the city of Medan southwards to the first overnight halt in Parapat. Mäkinen finished 3rd here last year, so knows how difficult the rally can be. Heavy rain in the weeks leading up to the rally made the going tough for all the crews. McRae, who won last year, used all the road to negotiate this right-hander and quite a bit of the ditch on the way out. Kankinen made a welcome return to the series in Indonesia and quickly settled into the slippery stages. Carlos Sainz was on his first visit to this event, although you'd never have guessed. Kenneth Eriksson's another driver who's competed on this event before, on his way to becoming Asia-Pacific champion.
Slippery break, vinkel höger.
One of Eriksson's competitors in that series was Richard Burns, who was destined to become the first retirement of this year's rally.
50.
At the end of the first stage, the slippy corner in the notes, and the car.
Sainz was joined in Indonesia by the Welshman Gwyndaf Evans, who's responsible for a lot of the Ford team's test and development work. Piero Liati had a new co-driver, Fabrizio Pons, and the Italian pair was soon in the thick of things. The damage to the front of the Impreza a clue as to what happened. There's another who'd been colliding with bits of Indonesia. In his case, as the side of his Lancer suggests, it was a little more serious. McRae was now locked in battle with Mäkinen for the lead. Considering the conditions, it was a close contest, which McRae was pleased to be leading.
Yeah, it's been good, fairly close, but very difficult with the inconsistency of the conditions, but that's par for the course here.
Behind the leading pair, 3rd place was also hotly contested. Kankinen, displaying yet more battle scars, and his navigator Nicky Grist demonstrate just how slippery the conditions were.
Keep right of the jump to absolute right of the crest. Then 120, look bad right tight.
Richard Burns was about to be joined on the road back to Medan. This time, though, it was Subaru who suffered.
Kenneth's hit a bridge parrot.
Ford, too, were suffering. Sainz had gearbox problems. Liati must have thought he'd had his problems for the day. He hadn't. The first day had one last trick up its sleeve. Mitsubishi, then Subaru had lost cars. Now it was Ford's turn. Gwyndaf Evans retired his Escort with the simplest of faults.
Line of SS9, we appear to have run out of fuel. Over.
The end finally of an amazing day, although ahead of the remaining crews lay day 2's 7 stages, which would bring them back to Parapat after a little over 12 hours on the road. The lush green paddy field soon saw the first retirement of leg 2, Tommi Mäkinen. That meant McRae was now out on his own. evidence of yet another close encounter with a bush, Sainz was engaged in the fight for second place with Liati. Conditions were, if anything, getting worse. Kankinen too was struggling.
30. Medium left. 70. I've never seen anything look bad.
The leader at the end of the day was McRae.
When it rains here, you can't believe how slippy it is. It makes it quite interesting.
And so to day 3 and the start of the last and longest leg. 13 hours of competition over 11 stages took the crews back to Medan and the finishing ramp. The morning saw the spectacular and needless retirement of the leader. Intercom failure meant that McRae and Derek Ringer had to resort to hand signals, a system that obviously didn't work. As the rally drew to a close, some pretty unfamiliar names filled the leaderboard. Retsa Pribadi was 5th, while Yoshio Fujimoto was 4th. Kankinen had inherited the lead after McRae's accident, but that lead was to be short-lived. The drive of the final day came from Liati.
Today is fantastic for me because the rally is very, very good. The team is fantastic. The tire is incredible. It's incredible.
But it was to be Carlos Sainz who would win the rally. An incredible result at the end of what had been a fairly incredible rally, although the dramas hadn't yet finished.
We have been excluded from the rally from immediate effect. We are not accepting this. We categorically deny it.
As it turned out, the exclusion for an alleged servicing irregularity was overturned, and a relieved Sainz could take his first win of the year. At long last, the taste of champagne for Sainz and co-driver Luis Moya. The winning margin, 23 seconds from Liati, Kankinen and Fujimoto. Local drivers occupied most of the remaining top 10 places. In the Drivers' Championship, Mäkinen still led despite his retirement, although Sainz's victory meant that he was now only 5 points behind. Subaru now led the manufacturers' table, with Ford having closed the gap on Mitsubishi. The third hot event in a row came next, Greece's Acropolis Rally, the mainland of Greece on the coast of the Mediterranean. Leg 1 comprised 8 special stages, which took the cars northwestwards from the start in Athens to the first overnight halt in the town of Kamina Vorla. Following his retirement in Asia, McRae seemed inspired in Greece. A blistering time on the first stage saw him take a lead of 30 seconds. Mäkinen was quickly off in pursuit, but it seemed he could do nothing to catch McRae. Sweden's Thomas Rodström was the first to quit. Forced to run in the dust of a much slower Group N car, the almost inevitable accident put pay to what had been an encouraging performance. He'd been inside the top 5 on his very first visit to Greece. By the afternoon, with McRae and Mäkinen already engaged in their own private battle, the chasing pack were left trailing. Liati in the Subaru and Sainz in the Ford Escort were 2 of the drivers chasing 3rd place, together with the Subaru of Kenneth Eriksson. Behind those 3, meanwhile, was Sainz's 4th teammate in as many rallies, Bruno Thierry. Thierry made a good start, although individual performances were about to be overshadowed by controversy. McRae arrived at the next service halt, where the talk was of stage 6, or more correctly, one particular corner.
After the recce, we recce'd a certain way, which was correct, and then we came on the rally and the organisers had blocked that road. We almost had an accident, went off the road trying to avoid the blockage.
By some reason the spectators block it because they want us to make the hairpin. So when we arrived there, it was all blocked, and then we spun and we lost some time.
From Mäkinen's car, you can see a large log on the right blocking the stage. Yet when Thierry goes through, the log has gone, allowing him to take the shortcut. When Liati goes through, the log's back again.
There are two alternative routes round sort of effectively a hairpin bend, and it's always open, and the drivers take their own route round it the fastest quite naturally. Quite clearly it's not being marshalled properly and not being supervised effectively, and naturally the drivers are very upset about the situation, as am I.
Kenneth Eriksson, who had a big problem totally unrelated to that junction, has ended up with his penalty being deleted. So it's changed the rally quite a bit.
With Eriksson restored to third place, at least one man was happy.
But it's been a good decision on your part.
Fortunate.
As the day drew to a close, Mäkinen was second, ahead of Eriksson. But McRae still led, helped by that amazing performance on stage 1. The second leg contained a total of 7 stages in the mountains to the west of Kamina Vorla. The Greek spectators, always wildly enthusiastic, sensed that McRae wasn't prepared to throw away first place as he'd done in Indonesia. He began well and would do everything he could to safeguard the lead. Mäkinen was in hot pursuit, but knew that McRae would be difficult to catch. Sainz had his sights set on Eriksson's third place. Despite the warning sign, Patrick Bernardini's problems weren't down to his lack of experience, although having a co-driver to balance out a broken wheel is an advantage. The Italian Grifone team were also having their fair share of problems. Gilberto Pianezzola's door was only one of them. Rather more serious was this little incident. Tyres were becoming something of an issue. The rough Greek stages were making tyre choice difficult for all the teams. Mitsubishi, like Ford, were running on Michelin, while Pirelli tyres were used by the Subaru team. The Mäkinen-McRae battle was still going on, although the Scotsman would still lead at the end of day 2, despite that spin. His lead was now 45 seconds. Behind them, Sainz had finally taken that third place.
I think
Eriksson, meanwhile, had slipped to 4th.
Till vinkel vänster. 40. Höger 3.
Liati, always the faithful team player, was 5th. Leg 3 consisted of 6 special stages, none of which was less than 20 kilometres in length. The cars left Kamina Vorla at 8:30 in the morning for the long, hot drive back to Athens. McRae began the day fairly well, although he was 3 seconds slower than Mäkinen on the very first stage.
And hairpin left. Into 4 right plus, tightens long.
Mäkinen was charging on the morning of day 3 and took 20 seconds off McRae in a little over 70 kilometres. Aside from the battle for the lead, Belgium's Freddy Loix was 7th, while his fellow countryman Bruno Thierry was 6th. There were more serious problems for the Subaru of Kenneth Eriksson. The Swede had to stop and change a puncture which cost over 3 minutes and dropped him a place. That handed 4th to Piero Liati. Yet again, a steady and remarkable drive was rewarding the Subaru team with valuable championship points. Trying to ignore the huge drops, Sainz and Lewis Moyer would end the rally in 3rd place. By now, McRae was back in charge. Quickest on the first 2 stages of the afternoon, he looked set to take victory by nearly a minute. Then, as the cars headed for the final stage, an ominous rumble meant last-minute dramas for the Subaru team. McRae had a broken bearing in his Impreza's prop shaft, a job which would take his mechanics around 15 minutes to fix, but they only had 10. In the end, the repair took just 9 minutes, and the car reached the time control with 3 seconds to spare. Tommy Mäkinen could only look on as McRae's car started the last stage with a lead of 42 seconds and no time penalties. A relieved McRae could finally take his first win of the year. Indonesia's accident now very much forgotten. Mäkinen finished a frustrating second.
Unfortunately,
Last couple of stages was so rough and we couldn't go flat out because tire wearing was so bad.
.50 McRae's winning margin, with Mäkinen, Sainz, Liati and Ericsson finishing in that order. Bruno Thierry finished 6th. Mäkinen still led the Drivers' Championship, but McRae was now catching Sainz. At almost the halfway point in the season, those 5 drivers could still take the title. It was very much the same in the Manufacturers' Series. From a European summer to a South American winter as the series crossed the Atlantic for the Rally Argentina. The rally is based in the foothills of the Andes Mountains northwest of the capital city, Buenos Aires. Leg 1 comprised 13 stages to the west of the headquarters city, Cordoba, covering nearly 200 kilometres and taking the cars around 9 hours to complete. Mäkinen quickly made his intentions obvious and took an early lead. For McRae, though, there were spectator problems. Rallying is almost a religion in South America, and those huge crowds cause problems for all the teams, as McRae explained. You can get an idea of a driver's eye view of the huge crowds from Sainz's car, or from this helicopter shot of Ericsson. But once clear of the spectators, it became obvious that the battle from the Acropolis was still very much on. Mäkinen might have led, but McRae was off in hot pursuit. Yet, for the second time in 1996, McRae was overdue at a service area. Then he turned up, minus the car.
We had an accident on the last stage about 2 kilometres from the end. It finished.
That left Kenneth Ericsson upholding Subaru honours. It was now vital that both remaining cars finished. Piero Liati in the third car was now elevated into the point scoring. Sainz in the leading Ford Escort began well, although yet again problems weren't far away. This time the transmission to the front wheels broke, leaving the car with effectively 3-wheel drive. By the time the car reached the next service area, the decision had already been made to swap the broken part on Sainz's car with the unbroken shaft on Thierry's. So Thierry was left struggling until the end of the day, when the fault could finally be fixed. After his retirement in Indonesia, Richard Burns had some making up to do. His Mitsubishi was setting some fairly quick times and his run was trouble-free, although Richard himself was complaining of a bad head cold. There were no such problems for Mäkinen, who ended day 1 with a lead of 26 seconds. Third was Liati, so both Subarus were well placed, even if the team leader was already on his way home. For Sainz, his problems hadn't ended with the transmission failure. Leg 2 of the rally consisted of 10 stages to the north of Cordoba. Another 9-hour day would see a further 200 kilometres of competition, including the super special stage at Jesus Maria. Mäkinen and Seppo Harjana were fastest on 2 of the first 3 stages of the day, and their only problem was a spin on the 4th, caught by our in-car camera. Ericsson knew that he'd have his work cut out to catch Mäkinen. He, though, would have a troubled day, as would Piero Liati, although the Italian's problems were more serious. Liati's miserable day continued, with the car stopped on one stage, allowing the Toyota of Rui Madeira to speed past. At the next service, the Subaru mechanics had yet more work to do. Burns was winning his battle against his cold. He was now 4th.
To easy right long, to slow fast left.
Sainz was finally trouble-free and in 3rd place.
Para derecha acá posible cuarta de tierra. Sassar. Para izquierda acá.
Ericsson ended the day in 2nd place, and Mäkinen would be in his sights at the start of the 3rd and final day. It had been another thrilling performance from Mäkinen, who by now was starting to dominate the championship. Would this be his 3rd victory of the year? The third and final day contained just 5 special stages, firstly to the north and then south of Cordoba, and would prove to be the most controversial day of the rally, if not the entire championship so far. It was the very first stage of the day which provided that controversy. From Mäkinen's in-car camera, you can just make out something blocking the little track which goes off to the left, forcing him to go right. If we go on board with the next driver along, Kenneth Eriksson, and stop the tape, you can clearly see the way ahead is blocked, but Kenneth carries on regardless. If we again freeze the action, this time of Richard Burns, you can clearly see the blockage. Burns too was forced to take the wrong route.
According to road book, we should turn to the left, but we couldn't because it was blocked with the bushes and stones, and we had to take long loop from the right, about 1 kilometer without notes.
My view is that I risk my life. I try to be professional. Maybe I'm not the best, but I try to be professional. And the organisers this year, they are proving that they are not professionals, they're just amateurs.
The stage continued, although just as in Greece, it was Eriksson who would be affected the most by the events. In Greece, it was steering damage, but this time it was a puncture. Again, just as in Greece, it would be Carlos Sainz who would stand to benefit. As the row rumbled on, Gilberto Pianezzola was able to bring his Toyota home in 6th place. 5th was Thierry, who must have wondered how he'd have done without the time loss on day 1. Burns was a promising 4th. He'd done more miles on this one event than during the whole of the first half of the year, and was coming to terms with the Mitsubishi at last. 3rd was Eriksson, after dropping a place when the stewards refused to cancel stage 24. Unlike Greece, this time his misfortune was to cost him a place. A relieved Sainz could then finish 2nd, although again, how would he have done without day 1's 3-wheel drive dilemma? Mäkinen could take victory number 3. Turned down the chance to spray some champagne, Tommy and Seppo were now on course to equal Didier Auriol's record of 6 wins in a season. Mäkinen's winning margin was confirmed at 1 minute 35 seconds from Sainz, and an unhappy Kenneth Eriksson was 3rd. Burns and Thierry rounded off the top 5. His win left Mäkinen with a lead of 13 points in the World Drivers' Championship. Sainz was still 2nd, but McRae's retirement means that he dropped to 4th behind Eriksson. In the Manufacturer Series, Subaru still led, but Mitsubishi had closed the gap to 22 points. The Midnight Sun, a typically Scandinavian picture. A postcard around every corner, yet the scenery only tells half the story. This is the country whose drivers have dominated the FIA World Rally Championship since it began, and the country which staged the Thousand Lakes Rally, round 6 of this year's series, Finland. Finland, in the very north of Europe, spends much of the year under a blanket of snow and ice, but the rally at the end of August was run in glorious sunshine. Based in the city of Jyväskylä, Leg 1 consisted of 10 stages. The very first of those was cancelled by the organisers after a serious accident, when one car left the road and hit a group of spectators, killing one. The Thousand Lakes organisers are rightly concerned about spectator safety, but it seems there's no guarding against a freak accident. Tommy Mäkinen was first on the road, which meant that he was sweeping the road of gravel for the others. The early leader, though, was Juha Kankkunen on his 3rd and final World Championship event of the year.
Very long fast left of a crest.
His teammate Marcus Gronholm was 2nd after the first stage. There were early problems for the Ford team, though. It seemed their run of bad luck was continuing.
The pipe that goes to the boost pressure sensor came off, so therefore he had no boost.
The leading escort, in fact, was the privately run car of Jarmo Kuteleito. Surprisingly, perhaps, Kenneth Eriksson was the leading Subaru driver. The Thousand Lakes is another event which favours the Scandinavians, and Colin McRae wasn't enjoying himself. The visit to the FIA in Paris had interrupted his reconnaissance of the rally, and he was about to pay the price.
6 left, tightens line.
Off the road, and the car hit the bank and rolled over.
Championship finished now?
Yeah, it's finished now, yeah.
At the end of day 1, Marcus Gronholm was 3rd. Tommy Mäkinen had recovered slightly. He was now 2nd. But it was the master, Juha Kankkunen, together with his Welsh co-driver Nicky Grist, who would lead the rally going into day 2. Nicky even having enough time for a wave for the camera. Kankkunen admitted that he was pleased with the day's work. Day 2 consisted of 12 special stages, this time to the south and then to the north of Jyväskylä, before returning to the city for the final stage of the day. It was now Kankanen's Toyota which was sweeping the roads for the Mitsubishi of Mäkinen, and the times immediately reflected the change. Besides the battle for the lead, Kytelähtö was now clawing back time and was starting to threaten third place. Gronholm, like Kankanen, had a fight on his hands. Bruno Thierry had another miserable day. He began it in 11th place and soon lost even more time. An electrical fault put pay to any hopes he'd had of a good result. The Ford jinx was continuing. Harry Rovanperä, like Kytelähtö, was another Finn in a Ford. He, though, was about to see his native country the wrong way up, and he retired soon afterwards. Rallying's almost a national sport in Finland, and huge crowds were sunning themselves in the forests watching the action. Things were pretty stable, though. Eriksson ended day 2 in 5th place. Jarmo Kytelähtö's escort was 4th, although the Finn was relieved to have reached Jyväskylä.
At the end of the day, we had the troubles with the clutch, and the last stages we drive very slowly and carefully and try to get the car in the service area.
Marcus Gronholm was 3rd, but he'd have one eye on his mirror on day 3. Kankanen, though, had lost the battle for the lead and would start the final leg in 2nd place. But would the conditions now favour him? Mäkinen, though, led the rally, something he was getting used to. Leg 3 to the west of Jyväskylä contained just 6 special stages, although the final day also had the earliest start, 6 a.m. Day 3 would see Ford's problem strike for the very last time. Sainz thought he'd almost made it to the finish when disaster struck. On the very last stage of the rally, mechanical failure brought his event to a cruel end. Sainz's exit left Thomas Rodstrom in 6th place for Toyota. Eriksson was 5th in the sole remaining Subaru. Then came the first of the 2 all-finish battles for 3rd place. In the end, Marcus Gronholm lost out to Jarmo Kytelähtö, the Toyota losing time to the Ford on each one of the final 6 stages, allowing Kytelähtö to take a deserved 3rd place. The other battle for the lead was pretty much cut and dried. Despite Kankanen's years of experience, he was destined to finish 2nd, although not without a fight. And so, yet again, for the 4th time this year, it was Mäkinen who won. Tommy's winning margin was 46 seconds, with Kankanen 2nd and Kytelähtö 3rd. Gronholm, Lindholm and Lampi meant that of the top 8 finishers, 6 were Finns. His victory lifted Mäkinen to 95 points in the Drivers' Championship table, a lead now of 33 points. Mitsubishi also moved ahead of Subaru in the Manufacturers' Series, with Ford still 3rd. Next came the long journey south to Australia. Apart from 2 visits to Langley Park, Leg 1's 11 stages were all to the south of the city. After all his problems in Finland, Sainz was the early leader. He obviously hoped he'd be out of the headlines. Some hope. It was soon business as usual. Mäkinen quickly took over the lead and knew that victory would virtually guarantee him the driver's title. Kenneth Eriksson, though, also needed a good result to clinch his 2nd Asia-Pacific title and was trying hard to catch Tommy.
43 efter krön. 40. Höger 5 kort. Break 20. Vänster 2 plus.
McRae started cautiously, keen that Australia wouldn't be a repeat of Finland, Argentina or Indonesia. Bruno Thierry began superbly, 2nd after stage 2 to Sainz. However, the all-too-familiar story wasn't long in coming. Restored to the team after missing the 1,000 Lakes, Piero Liati was another who began well. His problems, though, were uniquely Australian.
Unfortunately, we were killing a kangaroo.
Australian Neil Bates lost his wipers, then hit muddy water, the perfect combination for zero visibility. After his 4th place back in Argentina, a confident Richard Burns came to Australia minus the head cold. He was 5th at the end of day 1. 4th was McRae, although he admitted he wasn't trying 100%.
I just don't feel very confident in the stages and the tyres, so I'm taking it a bit easy.
Ericsson was 3rd, but needed only to finish ahead of Burns to secure the Asia-Pacific title. 2nd was Sainz. 37 seconds separated Sainz from the overnight leader, Mäkinen. Tommy, though, was on winning form. It seemed nothing could stop him. Even his mechanical worries were minor ones. The second leg's 8 stages were all southeast of Perth, the only exception being the 3rd and final visit to Langley Park. A 6 a.m. start saw the cars heading off towards the massive Bunnings forest. Mäkinen led the cars into Bunnings, although Mother Nature was about to play a little game with the drivers. Mäkinen and Seppo Harjana were the first to sample Bunnings in the rain. They'd been warned about the famous water splash, now much deeper and wider than usual. As they approach, Mäkinen slows right down almost to walking pace and keeps to the right-hand side of the road. To the delight of the huge crowd, the Mitsubishi makes it through. Tommy, though, is far from happy. For Carlos Sainz, the water splash would be very different. Despite receiving the same warning as Mäkinen from the marshals at the stage start, Sainz approaches the water a lot faster and takes a more central line, with disastrous results. 2 minutes behind Sainz was the Subaru of Kenneth Eriksson. Would he too fall victim to the Bunnings water splash? Despite keeping to the right, just as Mäkinen had done, Kenneth tries to drive through too quickly and the water claims its second victim. By now, Sainz is out of the car and is watching events in disbelief. McRae is next and he approaches at speed. Moya tries to flag down the Subaru and McRae's own gravel crew are on the left, urging him to take the right-hand line through the water to no avail. Colin's father, the former British champion Jimmy McRae, helps push the car clear of the water. Luckily, Colin keeps the engine running and is able to drive out of the stage.
Obviously the ford's far too deep. It was crazy to even think we could go through there. It's like a river, it's not a ford.
By now, Sainz, Eriksson and the others were getting angrier by the minute. Everyone, even David Richards, tried to help, but to no avail. Surely the organisers had no option but to cancel the stage. Eventually the stage was cancelled, leaving the cars to drive onto the next stage in convoy. Bruno Thierry's car, though, would splutter on for a while. At the end of the day, McRae was 4th, although he had a few scares along the way. Sainz, grateful to have escaped Bunnings unscathed, was 3rd. While Eriksson, also relieved, had climbed to 2nd place. Mäkinen was still leading the rally and stood to clinch the Drivers' Championship if things stayed as they were. Leg 3's 8 special stages to the east of Perth would decide not only the rally, but also possibly one of the 2 World Championships with 2 rounds still to go. Behind the leaders, Thierry would finish a disappointing 6th. Burns was set to come home in 5th place, another strong result. McRae was 4th, although seemingly satisfied with his performance. Sainz began the final day 31 seconds away from that vital 2nd place, and the race was on. No matter how Eriksson drove, Sainz was taking time off him on every stage.
Till höger 5, till vänster 5, I höger 5 plus, till vänster 5, 40 twist.
By now, Mäkinen had relaxed a little, although he still drove through the last stage like a man possessed. His 5th win of the year was now inevitable.
Well done, well done, well done.
Yet more champagne, his 5th victory of the year, and still 2 rounds to go. Mäkkinen's winning margin was 1 minute and 17 seconds from Ericsson, whose 2nd place was enough to give him victory in the Asia-Pacific Championship. Sainz finished 3rd, McRae 4th and Burns 5th. To confirm the drivers' championship positions, Mäkkinen, with 115 points, is the new world champion. Sainz has 74 points, while Ericsson now has 66. The Manufacturers Series, however, is still wide open. The series returned to Europe for the final 2 rallies. The penultimate round, round 8, was the San Remo rally in Italy, which began with the latest in a long line of prestigious retirements. Mäkkinen, the newly crowned World Drivers' Champion, lasted only a kilometre. With loose gravel causing 1 or 2 problems for the front runners, Andrea Dalla Villa was the surprise leader of the rally, although normal service would soon be resumed. Piero Liati on his home event was soon in 2nd place, although the slippery gravel even caught him out. Once Dalla Villa had slipped back, Colin McRae inherited the lead.
And 6 left into 4 left plus line.
The ever-spectacular McRae was delighting the crowds, and his boss for once. Bruno Thierry ended the short first day in 7th place. Ericsson was 6th in the first of the 3 Subarus. Mitsubishi, meanwhile, had brought along a secret weapon, the 1994 world champion.
And suddenly, Mitsubishi called me and, okay, big smiling, and happy to be here.
By the end of the day, a smiling, happy Oriol was 5th.
Attention, gauche 5, attention, attention intérieur, 5 attention, attention intérieur.
Sainz would have been 5th, but deliberately incurred a 10-second penalty and dropped to 8th, hoping that the extra 3 cars sweeping the road of gravel would help. Then came the first of the local drivers, Gilberto Pianezzola, whose Toyota was 4th. The identical car of Dalla Villa was now 3rd after that dramatic start, while Liati in the Subaru was 2nd.
E destra 2 meno lunga, e sinistra 2 più, e destra 3 più.
Once again, it was Liati's teammate McRae who led the rally. With Mäkkinen out of the way, it was imperative to score maximum manufacturers' points. A slender lead over his teammate. Liati, though, was in hot pursuit on stages he knows well. But on the morning of day 2, we lost another Italian, Dalla Villa, who rolled his Toyota into retirement. Pianezzola, meanwhile, was dropping back, unable perhaps to stand the pace of top-flight rallying. Oriol's debut for Mitsubishi wasn't going well either. A charging Sainz was beginning to threaten the leading pair. His gamble looked to have paid off, if only it hadn't rained. Torrential rain on the 9th stage dramatically halted Sainz's progress. Rui Madeira's problems were a little more obvious. This off meant instant retirement. And so to the end of the gravel stages. By the time the cars headed back towards San Remo, Thierry was 5th. Ericsson was 4th. While Liati had slipped to 3rd.
Più in tornantone destro.
Sainz and Moya were now 2nd, just 32 seconds behind the leader. 2nd place had eluded them in Australia, but in Italy they were out to win. McRae, though, was where he enjoyed being, out in front and on the edge. He'd lead the rally into the 3rd and final day, even if there was still the odd moment of over-enthusiasm.
6 over crest.
At the last service area of the day, the mechanics had to change the cars from gravel to tarmac specification. With San Remo changing to an all-tarmac format for next year, this was the final time this will ever happen. There was drama, though, right at the start of day 3. Liati's Subaru refused to start, and the Italians' rally was over. McRae, the overnight leader, set off into the mountains north of San Remo with a slender lead. The heavy drizzle falling on an already damp road would make life difficult. 2 minutes later, and Sainz was on his way. As on so many other occasions this year, it was becoming a battle of the tyres as much as the drivers. Oriol, meanwhile, had battled through the problems of day 2 and would finish in 8th place, although the manufacturer's title was slipping away from Mitsubishi. Franco Cunico finished 6th in his privately run Escort, while a thrilling battle for 4th place ended with Ericsson relegated to 5th on the very last stage. Freddy Loix from Belgium had driven superbly to snatch 4th place from Ericsson.
Om rechts 70, 150 rechts 52, 50 links 63 knop.
The Toyota practically flew around the narrow, twisting mountain roads on the final day. Thierry took a deserved 3rd place. After all his disappointments, a podium finish was just reward. But at the front, the battle for the lead went right to the wire. McRae had been losing time to Sainz all day and began the final stage with a lead that had been trimmed down to just 11 seconds. Sainz could almost taste victory. McRae and Ringer reached the end of the last stage and held their breath. At the service area, the McRae family heard the news at the same time as Colin. He'd won by 22 seconds. So McRae had 22 seconds to spare, although Ford's consolation came in the form of 2 podium finishes. That great final day drive by Loix gave Toyota 4th place. Although the Drivers' Championship had already been decided, Sainz was still in 2nd place behind Mäkinen, with McRae 4th. Subaru had now established a 33-point lead going into the final rally of the season. Round 9, the Rally Catalunya, was held in Carlos Sainz country. 6 stages made up the first leg of the rally in the mountains west of the base town, Lloret de Mar. Huge crowds lined the mountain roads, and nearly all of them were there to cheer on one man, Carlos Sainz. However, after McRae and Mäkinen's retirements in Catalunya, it was Sainz's turn.
Vamos, 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 vamos.
Bruno Thierry was then left flying the Ford flag. Bruno, cheered on by his fan club, took an early and short-lived lead. Piero Liati was hard on his heels and snatched the lead on the 2nd stage.
Per sinistra 4 più lunga. In destra 4.
The sensation of San Remo, Freddy Loix, was next and would run in the top 4 for much of the rally. Then came the San Remo winner, McRae, although the slippery Spanish stages weren't to his liking.
Right over crest.
Mäkinen had a replacement co-driver after Haryana had injured his back in San Remo, although they too had a moment on Sainz's bend. Richard Burns was once again driving the 2nd Mitsubishi. Ericsson was another who had one of those moments he'd rather forget. With Sainz out, Oriol Gomez was now the leading Spaniard in 5th place. It was an amazing performance in the 2-wheel drive Renault Megane. Huge crowds packed the final stage of the day and saw Mäkinen safely and frustratingly perhaps end day 1 in 5th place. McRae was 4th, for once playing a supporting role to one of his teammates. Loix was 3rd with another Belgian, Thierry 2nd, although just 6 seconds covered 2nd to 4th places. And so it was Liati's Subaru which led, but only just. Day 2 began and ended with a long motorway drive south, with the day's 7 stages all based south of Barcelona. Liati set off with a slender lead, although running first on the road wasn't an issue for a change. He began to extend that advantage.
In sinistra 2 e destra 2 più, 30, sinistra 3, 80.
Thierry began the day badly, a poor tyre choice costing time on all the morning stages. Thierry's problem meant that Loix was now second. Gomez too had tyre problems.
I explode the tyre rear, and it's not a good day in this moment.
The conditions were still catching people out. This is the Seat of Jesus Puras. By the end of the second day, Patrick Bernardini's escort was up to 6th place. Mäkinen and his new co-driver Juha Repo were still 5th. While Thierry had recovered a little and was 4th. Loix was proving that his 4th place in San Remo hadn't been a fluke. He was in a strong 3rd place. McRae, though, had moved quietly up through the leaderboard. He ended day 2 in 2nd position, just 3 seconds behind the identical Subaru of Piero Liati. The 3rd and final leg was virtually a rerun of the 1st in the mountains west of Lloret. Last rally of the year, and things couldn't have been closer. The tension was evident. As the two Subarus battled it out, Richard Burns in the Mitsubishi became the last victim of a spectacular season.
To flat left, 60.
In Group N, the so-called showroom class, Uwe Nittel lost the title on the final afternoon due to a slow puncture. Gustavo Treyes from Uruguay picked up the World Championship after a terrific two-way struggle. But all eyes were on the head of the leaderboard. Bernardini finished 6th. Mäkinen finished 5th, but knew that Mitsubishi had lost the championship, while Loix had last-minute trouble. Like Loix, Bruno Thierry had a troubled afternoon. At the end of stage 17, his radio message to the team tells the story. Despite his worries, Thierry managed to finish 3rd. And so, yet again, the last stage would decide the rally. When Liati reached the end of the final stage, there was only one question. What was his time?
22:56.
McRae came through next, and he immediately knew that he'd done it.
54, so that means you've won it by 3 seconds, yes?
No, more than 3. Yeah, we've won it anyway. That's the main thing.
Victory donuts for McRae, although the champagne spraying was tinged with sadness. That would be his last event with Derek Ringer. The final positions. That 7-second margin giving McRae one of the closest victories of the year. Liati's 2nd place equalled his best result of the year in Indonesia, while Thierry, Loix and Mäkinen rounded off the top 5. McRae's victory in Catalonia lifted him into the runner-up position in the drivers' table above Sainz. Ericsson and Liati ended the year in 4th and 5th places respectively. Subaru's 1-2 gave them the manufacturer's title, but the size of their wins surprised many. Catalonia also saw 2 of next year's machines unveiled. The wraps came off 2 new World Rally cars, one from Ford, the other from Subaru. With these cars, 14 rounds, and such a close finish to this year's series, 1997 will, I'm sure, be another vintage year.